The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not grass, not lake water, chlorine. Sharp, artificial, wrong. Then came the sound. A low mechanical hum, steady, like something draining. I stepped out of my truck and froze. A thick hose, industrial grade, ran from my lake, across my land, straight into a row of brand new houses. Water, my water, was pouring into their decorative ponds like it had always belonged there. "Sir, you can't be here." The voice came from behind me. Calm. Practiced. I turned slowly. A guy in a security uniform stood at the edge of my own dirt road, one hand resting on a clipboard like it gave him authority. "This is HOA property," he said, pointing to a freshly planted sign. "Willow Creek Estates, private amenity zone." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it didn't make sense. "You're standing on my land," I told him. He didn't even blink. "Not according to our records." That's when I saw the gate. Steel. Brand new. Installed overnight. Blocking the only access road to my lake ranch. My gate was gone. Replaced. Locked. I walked closer, boots crunching gravel that felt different now, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I could feel my pulse in my ears. "Who authorized this?" I asked. The guard flipped a page like he'd done this 100 times. "HOA management. Full jurisdiction." Jurisdiction. That word stuck. Because I knew something he didn't. Jurisdiction doesn't just appear overnight. But before I could say anything else, a golf cart rolled up behind him. White. Polished. Quiet. Too quiet. And then she stepped out. Victoria Hale. Perfect hair. Perfect posture. The kind of smile that looks friendly until you realize it never reaches the eyes. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, like she'd been expecting me. "Welcome back." I hadn't told anyone I was coming. That hit me first. Then the second hit came harder. She wasn't surprised to see me. She was prepared. "You've made some changes," I said, nodding toward the hose, the gate, the sign, the houses behind her. She clasped her hands like she was about to explain something simple to a child. "We've improved the community," she said. "That lake is now a shared resource." Shared resource. My grandfather dug that lake in 1972 with a rented excavator and 3 weeks of Texas heat. It wasn't a resource. It was ours. "You're pumping water off my property," I said. Still calm. Still controlled. Because losing your temper is how you lose everything else. She tilted her head slightly. "That's where you're mistaken." There it was. The confidence. The kind that doesn't come from being right. It comes from thinking you can't be challenged. "According to the updated plat and zoning records," she continued, "this entire section falls under HOA management." I looked past her. At the houses. At the families moving in. At kids riding bikes next to water that used to feed my cattle, my land, my life. And for a second, just a second, I felt it. That drop in your stomach when the ground shifts under you. But then something else kicked in. Something quieter. Sharper. Because I've worked land development before. I've seen bad maps. Fake easements. Paperwork that looks clean until you zoom in 1 inch too far. And this felt wrong. Not emotionally. Structurally. "Where are you watching from?" I muttered under my breath, almost to myself, staring at that pipe draining my lake like it was nothing. Drop it in the comments, because what you're about to see, I exhaled slowly, eyes locking back on Victoria. This isn't going to end the way you think. She smiled wider. Like she'd already won. Like the story was over. But here's the thing she didn't know yet. This wasn't about a lake. This wasn't even about land. This was about one small detail buried in paperwork, so old nobody thought to check it. And if I was right, every single house behind her, every street, every contract they'd signed, was sitting on something they never legally owned in the first place. I did not argue with her. That is the part most people get wrong. They think you win by shouting louder. You do not. You win by understanding what the other side does not even realize they are standing on. I looked at that pipe again, the water flowing out of my lake like it belonged to someone else, and I felt that same tight pressure in my chest. Not panic. Not anger. Focus. Because something about this was too clean. Too fast. Land does not change hands overnight. Not legally. Not without a trail. "You should leave," the guard said, a little firmer this time. "We can call the sheriff if needed." I nodded slowly, like I agreed. "Go ahead," I said. "Call whoever you want." Victoria's smile flickered for just a second. Not gone. Just thinner. She was not expecting that. Most people would push back. Argue. try to force their way through the gate. That is what gets you labeled as the problem. That is how you lose before you even start. I turned around and walked back to my truck. Gravel crunching under my boots again, but now every step felt measured. Counted. I got in, shut the door, and just sat there for a moment. Hands on the steering wheel. Breathing. Because this was bigger than a gate. Bigger than a sign. They had paperwork. They said it right to my face. Updated plat. Zoning records. That means filings. Approvals. Someone signed off on this. And that means there is a record somewhere. Paper does not lie. People do. I started the engine and drove out without another word. In my rearview mirror, I could still see the hose pulling water out of my land. That image stuck with me the whole drive. 30 minutes later, I was standing in a place that smells like dust, ink, and old paper. The county records office. You ever walk into a place like that? It is quiet in a strange way. Not peaceful. Just heavy. Like every decision ever made is sitting in boxes around you. A woman at the front desk looked up over her glasses. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, keeping it simple. "I need the latest plat maps for Willow Creek Estates. And the original filings if you have them." She gave me that look. "The one that says this is going to take a while." "That is a big request," she said. "You working with a firm?" "No," I said. "Just trying to understand something that does not make sense." She studied me for a second, then nodded. "Give me a few minutes." I waited, tapping my fingers lightly on the counter. Not impatient, just keeping my head moving. Because here's the thing. If they really had full control, everything should line up. Clean boundaries. Clear transfers. No gaps. But if they rushed it, if they pushed something through too fast, there would be a crack somewhere. And cracks are where everything breaks. She came back with a stack. Thick. Heavier than it looked. "Start with this," she said. "Recent filings are on top. Older records are archived in the back if you need them." "I will need them," I said without even thinking. I took the stack to a table by the window, sunlight cutting across the paper, and I started flipping, page after page. Lines, numbers, coordinates, legal descriptions written in a way that makes normal people give up after 2 minutes. But I do not give up there. That is where I start. 10 minutes in, nothing. 20 minutes, still clean. 30 minutes. I slowed down. There it was. Not big, not obvious, just a line that felt off. A boundary description that did not match the natural markers I grew up with. The lake edge, the old oak line, the creek that feeds into it. It was shifted, just a little. Enough that if you trusted the map, you would never question it. But if you knew the land, really knew it, it did not sit right. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that one line. Because now I had a feeling. Not proof yet, but a direction. And that is all you need at the start. A direction that everyone else missed. I looked around the room again. Quiet. Still. Rows of records that nobody had touched in years. And I realized something simple. Victoria was playing with the newest version of the story. But land does not care about new versions. Land remembers the original. I pulled that page closer, flattening it with my palm like I could press the truth out of it. The line looked normal if you did not know better. Just numbers, angles, bearings. But I grew up walking that land. I knew where the creek bends after a hard rain. I knew where the ground dips just enough to hold water in spring. And this line, it cut straight through all of that like none of it existed. That is not right, I muttered under my breath. I flipped back a few pages, then forward again. Same boundary, same quiet mistake. Or maybe not a mistake, maybe something else. I stood up and walked back. To the front desk, papers in hand. The woman looked up again. "Find what you needed?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "I need the original survey. The first one ever filed for that land. Before any subdivision. Before any updates." She leaned back slightly. "That is going to be old," she said. "Like, pre-digital old." "That is exactly what I am looking for." She studied my face again, then nodded slowly. "All right, give me some time. Those are in storage. I will wait." And I did. 20 minutes turned into 40. I sat there thinking about that pipe, still running, still draining my lake while I sat in a building full of answers. Most people would have gone back to argue, to demand the gate be opened. But arguing without proof is just noise. And noise does not win against paperwork. Finally, she came back carrying a long cardboard tube and a thin folder. "This is the earliest survey we have on file for that parcel," she said, setting it down carefully. Dated 1971. My chest tightened just a little. That was before my grandfather finished digging the lake. Before any of this started. Thank you, I said, already unrolling it on the table. The paper was yellowed, edges worn, but the lines were clean. Hand-drawn. Precise. The kind of work you only get when someone knows it has to last. I traced the boundary with my fingers slowly. North line. East corner. Creek inlet. And then I saw it. Clear as day. The lake basin. Marked as a natural water retention area. And the boundary line? It wrapped around it. Not through it. Around it. Exactly how I remembered. I leaned in closer, comparing it to the newer plat map beside it. And there it was. The shift. Small. Maybe 30 feet at one point. 40 at another. Enough to move the official line just far enough to claim the shoreline. Enough to turn my lake into their amenity. I let out a slow breath. You see it, do not you? The woman said from behind the desk. I looked up. See what? She walked over, pointing at the two maps. That line is different, she said. Older surveys usually carry more weight if they were done right. I nodded. This one was done right. And now my mind was moving faster. Because if they shifted that boundary, if they used that version to build everything else, then every lot line, every street, every house placement was based on something wrong from the start. Not just my lake. Everything. I rolled the old survey back carefully, like it was something fragile. Because it was. Not the paper. The truth on it. Can I get copies of both of these? I asked. Certified copies? She replied. Yes, I said without hesitation. Certified. She gave a small smile. Smart move. While she went to make the copies, I sat there again, but this time it felt different. The pressure in my chest was gone, replaced by something steadier. Direction had turned into something stronger. Not foolproof yet, but close. Very close. Because now I knew this was not just about a disagreement. This was about a line that should have never moved. And the moment you move a line like that, everything built on it starts to lean. I walked out of that office with a folder in my hand and one clear thought in my head. Victoria thought she owned the story because she had the newest version of the map. But I was about to show her something she could not rewrite. The original. I did not go back to the gate. Not yet. That would have been the easy move. The emotional move. Instead, I drove straight past my own land and into town again, the folder sitting on the passenger seat like it weighed more than it should. Because now I had something real. Not just a feeling. Not just a memory. A discrepancy. And in land law, a discrepancy is the beginning of everything. I pulled into a small office building with a faded sign that read Henderson Surveying and Land Services. It was the kind of place you would drive past 100 times without noticing. But inside, this is where lines get drawn for real. I walked in, the smell of coffee and printer ink hitting me right away. A guy in his late 50s looked up from behind a cluttered desk, glasses low on his nose. You lost? He asked, not rude, just direct. No, I said, setting the folder down. I think someone else is. He gave a small smirk. All right, I will bite. What do you have? I opened the folder and laid both maps out. The new plat. The original survey. Side by side. He leaned forward, slow at first, then closer. His smirk faded. Where did you get this? He asked. County records, I said. Certified copies. He nodded, eyes still locked on the lines. You mind if I take a closer look? That is why I am here. He pulled a ruler from his desk, then a calculator, then something that looked like a handheld GPS reference sheet. For the next few minutes, he did not say a word. Just measured, compared, checked angles. And I just stood there, arms crossed, watching him work. Because this part matters. You do not walk into a fight like this alone. You bring someone who speaks the language better than anyone else. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. Well, he said, rubbing his chin, that is not a rounding error. How bad? I asked. He looked at me directly now. Bad enough that if this original survey holds, everything built off that updated plat is off. And I mean everything. My jaw tightened just a little. Including the houses? Including the roads, the lot lines, the utility easements, all of it. He tapped the newer map. This line right here, it is shifted. Not by accident. It is too consistent. I felt that steady focus come back again, sharper now. So what does that mean? I asked. He gave a small shrug. It means whoever filed this either made a serious mistake, or they knew exactly what they were doing and hoped nobody would check the original. He let that sit for a second, then added, and most people never do. I nodded slowly. That part did not surprise me. Most people trust what is handed to them, especially when it looks official. Clean lines, stamped approvals. But land does not care about clean lines. It cares about the first line, the one that started it all. Can you verify this? I asked. Like officially? He leaned forward again, tapping the old survey. I can run a full boundary resurvey, tie it to current GPS coordinates, compare it to both records. If there is a discrepancy, I can document it. How long? A couple of days in the field. Maybe a week for a full report. I did not hesitate. Do it. He nodded once. It is not going to be cheap. Neither is losing my land, I said. He smiled at that. Fair point. As he started gathering his equipment list, I picked up the maps again, rolling them carefully. My hands were steady now, because this was no longer just a suspicion. This was a process, a path, and every step from here mattered. As I walked back to the door, he called out, "Hey." I turned. "If this goes the way I think it might," he said, pausing for a second, "you are not just dealing with a bad HOA decision." "What do you mean?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair again. "You are dealing with a foundation problem. And when the foundation is wrong, everything on top of it eventually comes down." I nodded once. Not dramatic, not emotional, just understanding. Because now I could see it clearly. Victoria was standing on something she believed was solid. Something official. Something final. But underneath that, there was a line. And that line was about to move back to where it always belonged. I did not sleep much that night. Not because I was worried, but because my brain would not slow down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that line again. The wrong one. The one that cut through my land like it had the right to be there. By sunrise, I was already back in my truck, coffee barely touched, heading toward the ranch. Not to argue, not to fight, just to watch. Because when people think they own something, they act different. And I needed to see exactly how far they were willing to go. When I got close, I parked off the main road, out of sight. Walked the rest of the way along the old fence line that most people forgot even existed. The air smelled damp, early morning mist still hanging low over the ground. And then I heard it again. That steady hum. Louder now. I moved through the trees until I could see the lake. Or what was left of it. The water level had dropped at least a foot since yesterday. You could see the darker ring along the bank where it used to sit. That hit me harder than I expected. Not anger. Something deeper. Because this was not just property. This was years of work. Years of balance. And they were draining it like it was nothing. I crouched down, watching from a distance. 2 workers stood near the pump system, talking like it was just another job. One of them kicked at the hose with his boot. "They want it running all week," he said. "Something about filling those new ponds before the open house." The other guy nodded. "As long as we get paid, I do not care where the water comes from." I stayed quiet, just listening, because that one sentence told me everything. They were not just using my lake. They were advertising it, selling it, turning it into a feature. And that changes things. A lot. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Slow pan across the hose. The pump. The water flow. The houses in the background. Kids riding bikes near something they thought was theirs. Then I zoomed in on the control panel. Company name. Serial number. Details. Always details. Because later, when people deny things, details are what shut them down. I stayed there for another 10 minutes, just gathering everything I could without being seen. Then I backed out the way I came. No confrontation. Not yet. By the time I got back to my truck, my phone already had a dozen clips. Proof of use. Proof of intent. Proof of scale. And that is when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something told me not to. "Hello," I said. "Mr. Caldwell," a voice replied. Professional. Calm. "This is Daniel Reeves from Willow Creek Estates Management." I leaned back against the truck, looking out toward the trees. "Yeah," I said. "What can I do for you?" There was a brief pause. The kind where someone is choosing their words carefully. "We have been informed that you have concerns regarding the recent development activities." I let out a small breath. Concerns. That is what they were calling it. "That is one way to put it," I said. He cleared his throat slightly. "We would like to resolve this matter amicably. The HOA board believes there may have been some misunderstanding regarding property boundaries." I almost smiled at that, because now the tone was changing. Just a little. Not an apology. Not yet. But softer. Careful. "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "Is that what you call installing a gate on my road and pumping water off my land?" Another pause. Longer this time. We are operating based on the most current legal documentation available to us, he said. If there is new information, we are open to reviewing it. There it was. The door. Small, but open. Good, I said. Because there is. Silence on the other end for a second. Then, in that case, we would like to schedule a meeting with you and the board. I looked back toward the ranch, toward the direction of that shifted line. You can schedule whatever you want, I said calmly. But I am not bringing anything to a meeting until my survey is done. Survey, he asked. Independent, I said. Full boundary verification. GPS tied. Compared against original filings. I could almost hear him processing that. Understood, he said finally. Please keep us informed. I will. I replied, then ended the call. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand. Because now it was clear. They felt it. Maybe not the full weight yet. But something. Enough to reach out. Enough to shift from control to conversation. And that meant one thing. I was getting close. Real close. 3 days later, I was standing in the same spot again, but everything felt different. The air was hotter, heavier, like a storm was building even though the sky was clear. I watched as Henderson's truck rolled slowly up the dirt path, tires crunching over ground that used to be quiet. He stepped out, holding a tablet in one hand and a metal survey rod in the other. No rush. No drama. Just work. You ready for this? He asked, glancing at me. I nodded once. Been ready. He walked past me toward the edge of the lake, setting up his equipment like he had done it 1,000 times. The small device on the tripod blinked to life, connecting to satellites miles above us. That part always gets me. Something that high up, helping define something this grounded. He started calling out numbers under his breath, tapping coordinates into the tablet, moving point to point with slow, careful steps. Every few yards, he would stop, plant the rod, wait, then move again. It looked simple, but this was where everything got. Decided. Inches matter. Sometimes less. I stayed quiet, just watching, hands in my pockets. The lake sat lower now, maybe another 6 inches gone. The hose was still running in the distance, same steady hum, like it had no idea it was about to become evidence. After about an hour, Henderson walked back toward me, checking something on his screen. His face was neutral, but I could tell he was seeing it now. The same thing I saw. It is worse than I thought, he said. How much worse? I asked. He turned the tablet toward me, showing a map overlay. The original boundary in one color. The current plat in another. They did not just shift a little. They crossed. In multiple places. They did not just take the shoreline, he said. They pushed the line into your land by as much as 60 feet in some sections. 60 feet. That is not a mistake. That is a decision. I let that sink in. And the houses? I asked. He zoomed out slightly. Blocks of lots filled the screen. Streets. Driveways. Some of these properties, he paused, then said it plainly, are partially built on your parcel. I exhaled slowly. Not surprised. Not anymore. Just confirmed. So what happens now? I asked. He looked at me, serious now. Now we document everything. Every coordinate. Every deviation. This becomes a formal report. Once that is done, he gave a small shrug. This is no longer just your problem. It becomes their problem. A big one. I nodded. Because I understood what he meant. This was not just a boundary dispute anymore. This was liability. Contracts. Loans. Insurance. Everything tied to those homes depended on those lines being right. And they were not. We spent the rest of the day walking the entire perimeter. Point by point. Mark by mark. He flagged locations where the discrepancy was the worst. Small orange markers stuck into the ground like quiet warnings. I took photos of each one. Close up. Wide shot. Time-stamped. Because proof is not just what you have. It is how clearly you can show it. Around mid-afternoon, we reached the main road where the HOA had put up their new entrance sign. Big stone pillars. Clean lettering. Willow Creek Estates. It looked permanent. Solid. Like it had always been there. Henderson stopped right in front of it, checking his coordinates again. Then he looked up at me. You might want to see this. I stepped closer. He pointed to a spot just beneath the sign. According to the original survey, he tapped the screen. This entire entrance is inside your boundary. I stared at it. The sign, the road, the landscaping, all of it sitting where it should not be. And suddenly, that first moment at the gate made a lot more sense. They were not just acting confident. They needed to be. Because if this got questioned, everything started to fall apart. Henderson straightened up, adjusting his cap. "I will have the full report ready in a few days," he said. "Certified. Detailed. No room for argument." I nodded, eyes still on that sign. Because now I could see the whole picture. Not just the lake. Not just the line. The entire development. Built on something they assumed nobody would challenge. Something they thought was buried deep enough to stay hidden. But it was not hidden anymore. And for the first time since this started, I did not feel like I was catching up. I felt like I was ahead. 2 days later, my phone buzzed at 7:14 in the morning. I did not even need to check the name. I knew it was him. "It is done," Henderson said as soon as I answered. No small talk. No build-up. Just that. I sat up straight, already reaching for my keys. "I am on my way," I said. When I got to his office, the report was sitting on his desk. Thick, clean, organized. The kind of document that does not just suggest something, it proves it. He tapped the front page. Certified Boundary Survey. GPS tied. Cross-referenced with original filings and current plat records. I flipped it open, scanning the first few pages. Diagrams. Coordinates. Clear overlays showing exactly where the lines should be and where they had been moved. It was not subtle anymore. It was obvious. "Say it," I told him, looking up. He leaned back slightly. "The current HOA plat is incorrect. It encroaches onto your property across multiple sections. The lake, the entrance, parts of several residential lots, all inside your legal boundary." Hearing it out loud hit different. Not because I did not know, but because now it was official. Documented. Backed by data that no one could just brush off. "And this holds up?" I asked. "In court." He gave a small nod. "This holds up anywhere." I closed the report slowly. Because now came the part most people rush. The confrontation. The big moment. But that is where people mess up. They go in too early. They show everything at once. And the other side scrambles. Adjusts. Finds a way out. I was not doing that. "Do not send this to anyone yet," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yeah," I replied. "I want them to keep going." He studied me for a second, then nodded. "All right. Your call." I picked up the report and walked out, the weight of it steady in my hands. Not heavy, just solid. Like it was exactly what I needed at exactly the right time. Instead of going home, I drove back toward the development. This time, I did not hide. I pulled right up to the main entrance, stopping just outside those stone pillars. Cars moved in and out like nothing was wrong. Like everything was perfectly normal. I stepped out, holding the report at my side, and just watched. A real estate agent was standing near the model home, talking to a couple. I could hear bits of it from where I stood. "Private lake access," she said, smiling. "Exclusive community feature. It is one of the biggest selling points." I almost laughed. Not out loud, just in my head. Because there it was again. They were not slowing down. They were leaning in. Advertising it. Building on it. That was exactly what I needed. I pulled out my phone again and started recording. The sign. The agent. The words. Every claim being made about something they did not legally control. Because here's the thing. A mistake is one thing. But when you keep using that mistake to sell, to promote, to profit, it becomes something else entirely. I walked a little closer, just enough to hear more clearly. "Is the lake maintained by the HOA?" the buyer asked. "Yes," the agent replied without hesitation. "It is fully managed. Water levels, landscaping, everything." I stopped right there. Because that sentence, that one sentence, was going to matter. Later. A lot. I turned and walked back to my truck, not saying a word to anyone. No need. Not yet. As I drove away, my phone buzzed again. Same number as before. Daniel Reeves. I answered this time. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, voice a little tighter than before. "We would still like to schedule that meeting." I glanced at the report on the seat next to me. "Sure," I said calmly. "Let us do it." There was a small pause, like he was not expecting that answer to come so easily. "When are you available?" he asked. I smiled slightly, eyes on the road. "Soon," I said. Very soon. Because now everything was in place. The proof. The documentation. The evidence of what they were saying and doing in real time. And the best part? They still thought this was just a conversation. They had no idea that the ground under their feet was about to shift back to where it always belonged. I chose a small conference room at a neutral office downtown. Not theirs. Not mine. Clean table, glass walls. Nothing on the walls except a clock that ticked just loud enough to remind you time was moving whether you were ready or not. I got there 10 minutes early and set everything out exactly how I wanted it. The certified survey report in the center. Copies of the original 1971 survey on the left. The current HOA plat on the right. My phone face down, recording already running. Not hidden, just there. When they walked in, I could tell right away this was not going to be casual. Victoria came in first, same perfect posture, same controlled smile, but tighter now. Behind her was Daniel Reeves, holding a thin folder, and another guy in a suit I had not seen before. Lawyer. You can always tell. They sat across from me, and for a second nobody said anything. Just that quiet hum of the building and the clock on the wall. Victoria folded her hands on the table. Mr. Caldwell, she said, voice smooth but careful. We appreciate you meeting with us. I nodded once. Let us get to it. No small talk. No warm-up. She glanced at the papers in front of me. You mentioned new information regarding the boundary concerns. I slid the certified report forward just a few inches. Not all the way. Not yet. I did, I said. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Would you mind sharing what you have found? There it was. The ask. Calm. Professional. But there was tension under it. I could hear it in the way he slowed his words. I looked at him, then at Victoria. Before I show you anything, I said, I want to understand something. She tilted her head slightly. Go ahead. I tapped the current plat map on the right. You are operating under this, correct? Yes, she said without hesitation. It is the most recent approved filing. I nodded slowly. And based on this, you believe the lake falls under HOA management? That is correct. Still confident. Still steady. I let that sit for a second, then asked, and you have been using that lake, pumping water, advertising it, maintaining it, all under that assumption? Daniel shifted slightly in his chair. Not much, but enough. We have been operating within what we believe to be our legal rights, he said. I nodded again. Good, I said quietly. Then I slid the certified report across the table. All the way this time. No hesitation. Victoria's eyes dropped to the cover first. You could see it register. Certified Boundary Survey. Henderson Land Services. She opened it slowly, flipping to the first diagram. Daniel leaned in beside her. The lawyer did not say anything. He just watched. Page by page, the room got quieter. No clock now. No background noise. Just paper turning and the small sounds people make when they realize something is not going their way. Victoria stopped on the overlay page. The one with both boundary lines. Original and current. Side by side. Clear. Undeniable. What is this? She asked, but it was not really a question. It was a stall. That, I said calmly, is the original boundary compared to your current plat. Daniel took the report, flipping back a few pages, scanning the coordinates. This shows overlap, he said, more to himself than to me. It shows encroachment, I corrected gently. The lawyer finally spoke. How was this verified? His tone was controlled, but sharper. Full GPS-tied survey, I said. Cross-referenced with county records and original filings. Certified. He nodded slowly, like he was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Victoria closed the report halfway, then opened it again, like maybe it would change the second time. It did not. This does not make sense, she said, voice tighter now. I leaned back slightly in my chair. It does, I said. You just have not been looking at the right version. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. If this is accurate, he started, then stopped. He did not need to finish that sentence. We all knew where it went. I leaned forward just a little, resting my hands on the table. You built an entire system on a shifted line, I said. The lake, the entrance, parts of your residential lots. It is all inside my boundary. The lawyer closed the report carefully, placing it flat on the table. We will need time to review this, he said. I nodded. Take all the time you need. Victoria looked up at me then. For the first time, the smile was gone. Completely. What are you asking for, she said. Straight to the point now. No more control. No more performance. I met her eyes, calm, steady. Right now? I said. Nothing. That caught them off guard. You could see it. People expect demands. Numbers. Threats. Right now? I repeated. I am just making sure you understand exactly where you are standing. Silence again. But this time it felt different. Heavier. Because now it was not about who was right. That part was clear. Now it was about what came next. And that is where the real decisions get made. The room stayed quiet for a long time after I said that. Not the kind of silence where nothing is happening. The kind where everything is happening, just not out loud. Victoria looked down at the report again, then back up at me, like she was trying to find something in my face that would change what she was reading. She did not find it. Daniel finally leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Okay, he said slowly. Let us say this holds. Let us say the boundary is exactly where this report says it is. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. What happens to the homeowners? That question mattered. Not for them. For me. Because this was the line most people cross. Without thinking. You can win the legal fight and still lose everything else if you forget who is actually affected. I nodded once. They are not the problem, I said. They bought what they were told was real. The lawyer glanced at Victoria, then back at me. And the HOA, he asked. I looked at him calm. That depends on what the HOA does next. Victoria straightened slightly in her chair. Not confident like before. More measured. You said you are not asking for anything right now, she said. So what is this? I let out a slow breath. Because this part had to be clear. Simple. No room for confusion. This is me giving you a chance to fix it, I said. Daniel blinked. Fix it how? I tapped the report lightly. You stop using the lake immediately. You remove the pump. You correct the boundary records. And you work out a legal access agreement if you still want to use any part of the land. The lawyer nodded slightly, like he expected something along those lines. Victoria did not speak right away. She looked down again, flipping to the page with the entrance markers. The stone pillars. The part that sat entirely inside my boundary. And if we do not? She asked quietly. I met her eyes. No anger. No threat. Just truth. Then this moves forward, I said. And it does not stay a boundary issue. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. He understood exactly what that meant. Not just land. Not just lines. Contracts. Sales. Representations. Every statement made about that lake. Every listing. Every promise. It all connects. The lawyer closed the report again, slower this time. We will need to review everything internally, he said. You should, I replied. And you should move fast. Another silence. Shorter this time. Because now they were not questioning the facts. They were calculating the outcome. Victoria finally stood up, smoothing her jacket slightly. The same movement she probably used 100 times before meetings. But this time it felt different. Less control. More weight. We will be in touch, she said. I nodded. I will be here. They gathered their things and walked out, one by one. The lawyer last. He paused for just a second at the door, looking back at the table, then at me. Not hostile. Not friendly. Just aware. Then he left. I stayed there a little longer, sitting in the same chair, looking at the empty space where they had been. Because this was the moment people think is the end. The confrontation. The reveal. The shift. But it is not the end. It is the point where everything becomes real. 3 days later, I was back at the ranch. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No hum. No pump. No water moving through that hose. I walked down toward the lake, boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The hose was gone. The control unit too. Just marks in the ground where they had been. I stood there for a second, looking out over the water. It was still lower than it should have been, but it was not dropping anymore. That mattered. A truck pulled up behind me. I turned. Daniel stepped out, holding a folder. He walked over, stopping a few feet away. We have halted all usage, he said. Effective immediately. I nodded once. Good. He handed me the folder. This is a temporary agreement proposal, he added. Acknowledging your boundary and requesting access, terms moving forward. I took it, flipping it open briefly. Legal language. Careful wording. Different tone than before. Victoria? I asked. He exhaled slightly. She has stepped back from operational decisions for now. I closed the folder. That told